Good afternoon. Hello there. Hi. For those of you who I haven't met, I'm Steve Bustin. And our next session for the next 40 minutes, we are going to talk about sowing the seeds of business growth. So I'm here to posit to you that business growth is exactly the same as growing a garden. So are we going to talk about growth, what it means in both horticultural terms and business terms, and I'm going to set you a challenge. I'm going to set you a business challenge and a horticultural challenge by the end of this session. So that's what the packets are for. No peeking, Brian. So, welcome to my garden. This is my garden. This was in 2004. We just moved in, brand new house, brand new garden. It looks like a car park. That style of planting. That was 2004. This was 2 years later in 2006. Keep an eye on the banana tree. That's 2009. And that was this Monday. Now, I'm not saying that to show off. Actually, yes, I am. But actually, my garden has grown as my business has grown. I've been self-employed 14 years. I've been gardening since about 2004. So almost the same sort of length of time. And actually, I've learned an awful lot as I've gone through. Has anybody been up to my garden? A few people, yeah. We open it for charity most summers. So if you get a chance, I'm always happy to show people around, show it off, basically. So this is my business. This is Vanda Media. It's one of my websites. That's stevebustin.com, my other website. Spot the similarities? Anybody? Flowery shirt, absolutely. There's a motif there. There definitely is a motif there. If I go back, there's also a preponderance of purple and orange. But actually, there are definitely similarities between the way I grow my garden and the way I grow my business. Let's explore that a bit more. Sometimes in my business, there is too much going on. I can't cope with everything that I need to do. I have a to-do list from hell sometimes going on. And actually, exactly the same is true in my garden. Sometimes there is just too much going on. My business can be a bit chaotic. Those of you who've worked with me will know I have fingers in a number of different pies. I'm out doing all sorts of different bits and pieces over the year. And my garden's exactly the same. Sometimes it can just feel as if it's going to overwhelm me because there's so much needs to be done. So it's a bit chaotic. I don't always have enough time to spend on my garden or on my business, and I certainly don't have enough time to spend in my garden or in my business. Businesses can be a huge drain on your time. And actually, sometimes when I'm working, I'd rather be in the garden. But likewise, when I'm in the garden, sometimes I think, actually, I should probably be working. My best excuse, though, is when I'm gardening, I'm thinking. Some of my best business ideas have come to me in the garden, I promise. No white wine involved, much. Sometimes my garden runs away from me. Sometimes my business runs away from me. Sometimes I just feel as if I'm desperately trying to grab hold of it. Keep going on. Not enough planning. Is there anybody who's ever done too much planning in their business? Doesn't happen. Same in the garden. Long list of tasks, to-do list from hell. But there is always something in my garden that is at its best. So at the moment, the autumn colours are fantastic. The sunflowers are looking fantastic. There's always something that looks its best. And likewise in my business, there is always something that's at its best. There's something that's going really well. I've just launched a new product, just launched a new PR coaching product. It's going really well. People are buying it. They're signing up. So there's always something good. And finally, it's worth sharing. As far as I'm concerned, if you've got something good going on, share it. Talk about it. Business or garden. I say, I'm always happy to show people around the garden. I love doing it. It's my chance to show off. It's my creative outlet. Is a business really like a garden? Yes, I think it is. And here's why. Growth. It is what drives a garden, and it is what drives a business. If your business isn't growing in some way, there's a problem. If your garden isn't growing, you've got a serious problem. There's obviously something seriously wrong. So there's always growth going on. It is a creative outlet. How many people here think their business is their creative outlet? Yeah, a number of you. It's one of those ways you express what you are, who you are, what you do. It's a way you connect with people. And my garden is absolutely my creative outlet. It's where I can play out my wildest fantasies of colour and texture and all those sorts of things. But it's never finished. There is always something needs doing. Just like your business, I'm guessing, is never finished. There is always something that needs changing, something needs improving, there's something new to launch. It's never at a point where you can just let it roll and you don't need to do anything. It always needs work. It needs constant tending. You cannot ignore it, otherwise things start to fail. It can get messy. Gardens get messy. My garden's a bit of a mess at the moment because I haven't had time to work in it, and it's that time of year. That's my excuse. But also your business can get a bit messy. Can be really frustrating because you can see what you want. You know what you're trying to achieve, and you're actually not really putting it off. You're never in complete control of a garden or of a business. There's always too many external factors. In a garden, it might be the weather. In a business, it could be competition, your staff, or whatever. Hard work. You need hard work for both garden and business. But it can be incredibly rewarding. Business can be unbelievably rewarding. When it all goes well, things are going well, your clients like what you're doing, it's unbelievably rewarding. And the garden's the same. I can walk out in the morning, cup of tea, in my dressing gown, and I just get the most enormous thrill from seeing what I've achieved. And finally, and probably most importantly, is that one, return on investment. You've got to get a return on investment and a return on all that hard work from your business. Again, if you're not, there's a problem. And likewise from your garden. You can absolutely get a return on investment from it. So let's just think about what sort of business you might be. And I'm going to use some plant analogies here. So every business, I think, is like a certain type of plant. Are you an annual? That's actually a sunflower. Unusual colour for a sunflower, but it is a sunflower. Are you an annual? Annuals, you plant, they grow, they flower, they set seed in 1 year. Clues in the name. So they're a short burst of glory, but they tend to be the most colourful flowers in the garden. Quite often the highest scented as well. So those are the ones that really do grab your attention. But they can be a bit flash in the pan. They flower once, over. Some businesses are like that. And I would suggest that .coms, boo.com. Does anybody remember Boo? If you haven't read boohoo.com, sorry, Boohoo is the book, which is the story of boo.com. It is the best business book I have ever read. It is hilarious. It's fantastic, but I learned so much about business from it. But things like startups, .coms, seasonal companies, pop-up businesses are all annuals. It might be you have an annual product in your company. You just have something that's worked for a year, been glorious, it's over. So particularly if you're hooking a product or a service onto an event, like I've seen a number of companies trying to do stuff around the Rugby World Cup, very much an annual event, that'll be over. So are you an annual? Or are you a perennial? Now perennials are the plants that come back year after year after year. And they're good doers. They're often showy, can be lots of nice flowers. But actually they are useful because you can lift and you can divide a perennial. So that's a phlox. You can dig it up, literally, you can cut the root ball into two, and you can split it, and both halves will thrive. And there are a number of businesses do that. They will hive off part of the business, and actually it's only by hiving it off that it's going to thrive. You have to split the business sometimes to really let it work at its best. So perennials are the plants you're going to see year after year. They've been around for years. They'll have good years and bad years. And let's face it, which business doesn't? They'll have good years, bad years, but on the whole, they'll come back year after year. They're reliable. They are plants that we can trust, and if you're a perennial business, you're going to be a business we can trust. I think they're a perennial business. In fact, I'm guessing most of us in this room have perennial businesses. Who's been in business more than 5 years? Yeah, quite a number. You've got a perennial business. You've been around for years. You might have good years, bad years. You might every now and then have to pick it up and split. John Lewis hived off the food business. So actually, they were a perennial. They've lifted, split off, and both have thrived separately. Obviously still the parent company, but thrived separately companies. Or are you a shrub? Isn't that a lovely example of a shrubbery? I love that word, shrubbery. Shrubs are possibly the most boring plants in the garden, it has to be said. But they form a backbone. They form structure. They also form shelter. And a lot of people will plant a shrubbery, sorry, I'm going to have to keep saying it now. They plant it to provide shelter for other plants because it breaks the wind. So it actually provides shelter. So, bit dull, but they're there, they've been there for years. Shrubs will last for 30, 40 years. They've been around a long time. So, solid, dependable, bit dull. Solicitors, do we think? Professional services companies. I think, are shrubs. Dependable, solid, been around for years, not the most exciting on the block, but actually they serve a really useful purpose and they provide shelter to other businesses in the way that shrubs will provide a windbreak. So I think, yeah, those are shrub businesses. There is nothing wrong with being a shrub. I'm saying they're dull, but there's nothing wrong with being a shrub business, honestly. The other thing with a shrub is to brighten it up. You can grow a climber through it. You can grow sweet peas or a clematis or something like that up through your shrub and suddenly clothe it in new flowers. And there are a number of solicitors, I think, have realised that recently, and suddenly you're seeing rebranding and you're seeing a whole new approach to the way they present themselves, and suddenly they're much more modern, much more colourful, and really trying to pretend they're not a shrub. Are you a tree? Now, tree businesses are huge. A tree can dominate a landscape, can be the standout thing, dominates it from far and wide. Or trees can group together, form an ecosystem. We think of it as a wood. Tree businesses group together, form an ecosystem. We tend to think of it as a city. Because you've got big, long-lasting businesses. A couple of interesting features of trees. Very long branches. They can drop seeds or seedlings a long way from their parent, from the root. Again, tree businesses will often have branch offices. Boom. I don't think that's where the word comes from. But actually, that's exactly what they do. They have all these little offshoots. Did you know that some trees also poison the ground underneath them? Beech trees. If you look underneath beech trees, you will very rarely find anything growing, not even grass. It's because when the leaves drop off a beech tree, they leach chemicals into the soil that stops anything else growing. And let's face it, we all know businesses that do that. They poison the ground for any other competition. The classic example of tree businesses are the banks. Big, solid, grouped together in cities, or you can dominate a landscape. They can poison the ground, let's face it. Putting out branches, the whole thing. So they're the tree businesses. So what sort of business are you? Or are you a weed? Weeds are, the definition of a weed is a plant that is in the wrong place. That's the definition. That's what it is, a plant in the wrong place. Weeds are also incredibly tenacious. They spread like wildfire. And they are very, very successful. They will see off most competition. So there's a lot to say for being a weed. What's that? Dandelion. Dandelions are some of the most successful weeds in the UK. In fact, they originate in Europe. They are now found virtually across the globe. They've been that successful. Did you know dandelions are edible? Close relative of lettuce. Leaves that work very well in a salad. They have great medicinal properties. They can help get breast milk flowing. The roots can be boiled into tea to help constipation. They have a huge range of uses. Very, very historic dandelions. I mean, if you look up, there's lots of folklore around dandelions. Very successful weed has a really strong purpose. Bluebells. That's my dog, that's Belle. That's up in the woods at Stanmore this spring. Bluebells are actually a weed. You know, they just grow wherever. They just spread very well. But of course, they're also under threat from Spanish bluebells. These are English bluebells. If you go up to Stanmore, they're all English bluebells at the moment. There are Spanish bluebells starting to encroach that will actually hybridize and English bluebells will disappear. And that's a common thread from weeds, is they can start to root out the ones you really want and replace them with the weeds. And you can have foreign invaders replacing the natives. A classic example of a company that you don't want, that spreads all over the place and roots out the invaders, is that one. I think they are a classic weed company. So what sort of business have you got? Are you an annual? Are you a perennial? Are you a shrub? Are you a tree? Are you a weed? I say, there is not necessarily anything wrong with being a weed. They can be the most successful plants going. If you think as soon as you clear any patch of land, it will always be the weeds that come first. They're the early adopters. They can disrupt a market. And that can be a really good thing for a business to do. So, moving on. Once something is growing, you've got to encourage further growth. Now these are seedlings, these are in my garden, these are seedlings of stocks, they'll flower next year. Sown them from seed this year, and I've just potted them up. So they were in tiny little pots, they're now in bigger pots. And that's to give them more air, more feed, more room to grow, give them some space, let them develop as individual plants rather than just a big mass of seedlings. What in your business needs a bit more air? Is there a particular part of the business that needs more room to grow? Think about how you're going to allow stuff to what sort of feed you need to give it. And by giving feed to your business, that's not just putting in resources. You also need to feed yourself. You need to be learning. You need to be giving yourself new skills. You need to be relaxing. That is absolutely part of feeding yourself, which feeds your business. If you're not constantly moving and growing as an individual, your business ain't going to grow. Not going to happen. But this is the other way of getting stuff to grow more. Weirdly, it's to prune, which might seem a bit counterintuitive. We're going to cut stuff off to get it to grow more. But this is how it works. You can see this. I'm not absolutely sure what it is. I think it might be a lilac. I'm not absolutely sure what it is. It's being pruned in this picture. It's not mine. But it's interesting. They're cutting here. By cutting here, okay, you lose that bit of growth. But you see here, you've got 1, 2 growths out the side here. You've got a node there. You can just see the lump there. There's another one there. And in fact, there's another one here at the junction. So all of a sudden, by cutting that off, you're encouraging these to grow. That will sprout, and these will sprout. So instead of having one shoot with a flower on it, you're going to have half a dozen shoots with flowers on it. And we'd all like more flowers. So sometimes you have to prune something out to get it to grow. Does anybody know what that is? Or what this is showing? Coppicing. Yeah, is everybody familiar with the term coppicing? Yeah, most people nodding. Great. So what happens here, you've got a tree which would have had one trunk. You cut it to the ground. That doesn't kill it. What it does is it sends up multiple shoots. So this is actually pruning for profit, because you've taken one very strong, might have been a very big, thick tree, by cutting it, encouraging all this other growth, you've suddenly got, what, how many stems are there? 12, 15, something like that? It's narrower, it's thinner, but actually that's probably more usable in the timber industry necessarily than something big that's got to be cut into planks. So by coppicing, you're pruning hard to encourage growth. And this is the rule when you're pruning plants. You cut out the dead, the diseased, and the damaged. You'll sometimes hear dead, diseased, and crossing, which is if any branches are crossing and rubbing, but that means they're damaged. So, have you got anything in your business that's dead? Have you got anything on your website that you no longer do? Have you got a service that you're advertising that actually you don't really provide, you don't want to provide it anymore? Have you got products that are now out of date that really should disappear? If it's dead, get rid of it. Because actually it's holding the plant back, it's holding the business back. If it's diseased, if something's toxic, it will help kill your business. In the same way that if disease sets into a plant, it won't just kill one branch, it will kill the whole plant. So what in your business at the moment is diseased? Now it could be there's problems in your processes. Are there processes that need to be changed that really aren't working, that aren't serving the business? It can be staff. I think you've probably all thought about toxic staff. It happens. Have you got a member of staff who actually is a source of disease within the business? Maybe their attitude's wrong, maybe they're spreading discontent. Do you need to prune them out to make the plant healthy again, to get it growing again? And finally, the damaged. What in your business is damaged? What needs fixing? Is there anything crossing? Are there branches? Are people rubbing up against each other? When branches rub up against each other, they damage each other and then disease gets in. Have you got people rubbing up against each other who maybe need training, maybe need coaching, maybe need mentoring, so actually they can work together and take away that damage? But that's a lovely photo, isn't it? New growth needs protection. So when you prune something, you'll get a lovely flush of growth, but it's very soft. It's very whippy, as they call it. Slugs love it because actually it's soft, it's easy for them to eat, it's easy for them to digest. And if you've got new growth in your business, it will also be soft and whippy, and it will need protection from predators. So actually, what are you going to need to protect in your business while it's growing? You may need to if you've got new ideas on the go, you may need to give it some extra protection. Maybe you need extra staff, maybe it needs extra work, extra hours to give it the protection until it's strong enough to stand on its own 2 feet. That's a lettuce. Lettuces get slaughtered by slugs. Anybody who's tried growing them in this city will know. So yeah, what needs new protection in your business? This is my greenhouse. It doesn't have a name. I feel like I should give it a name. It doesn't have a name. This is my greenhouse in my garden. I use this to protect plants that will not grow without special conditions. So at the moment, it's got tomatoes in there. They're just coming to an end. It's had tomatoes, basil, aubergines, all sorts of plants that won't grow outside or won't grow successfully outside. So I've had to give them hothouse conditions. In the winter, I overwinter plants in there that wouldn't survive outside. In the summer, likewise, plants that need the extra heat, need the protection. What in your business needs hothousing? Now, hothousing within academia means sort of cramming and giving people extra attention. I think exactly the same is true in business. What needs protection? And that extra special protection might be giving it extra time, might be hiving off certain facilities or resources within the business to give it the protection it needs to grow. And I'll give you an example. I'm writing a book at the moment, and I'm having to hothouse that as a project. So I'm having to give it 2 hours every morning to write, because there is no way, once my working day kicks off, there's no way, with all the interruptions and calls and emails and all that sort of stuff. So I'm having to dedicate specific time and resources, and I've had to dedicate a fair amount of money to it, as well as my time and my expertise, to get the book written. So I'm hothousing it. I'm giving it that protection it needs to help it grow. So what needs hothouse protection in your business? So let's get growing. This is where the little packets on your chair come into use. So I want you to open the packet, and you will find a number of things in there. I am going to set you a challenge. I'm going to set you a growth challenge. You will find a list of questions. These are jiffies. This will expand, and I'll show you how in a moment. You should also find a seed, and I'm going to ask you to grow something. Let's just talk through the mechanics of this. The jiffy needs to be expanded, because that's what you're going to sow your seed in. It's very easy. Take yourself a pot of water, he says, moving away from his computer, and stick it in. That will take about 10 minutes. Just dunk it a bit so it gets soaked. You don't have to put a lid on. But after about 10 minutes, it looks like that. So it's absolutely perfect for sowing. So it all comes out. This is still damp at the moment, because I expanded this morning. And that's what you're going to sow in. In your envelope, you should have a seed. Anybody know what sort of seed it is? It's a broad bean, yeah. Nice, easy one. One of the nice advantages of a broad bean seed is it can be sown any time between now and about next April, because they'll germinate in winter. To sow it, it is really simple. It's a little hole, and you will actually find there's sort of a hole already created in there. When you push in, pop it in, squeeze it shut, and that's it. That broad bean seed is now sown. Okay, so that's my challenge to you, to go away and grow a broad bean seed. But needless to say, I've now got compost all over my hands. You haven't got a seed? I have got more at the back. Apologies, must have fallen out. I have got more at the back. I will get them for you at the end. So I'm going to show you what happens when you sow that seed. So we're looking sideways on at the soil here, so it's behind glass. These are actually lima bean seeds, which are very similar, not quite the same, but very similar. And the thing to notice is what happens first. The roots come down first. If you are going to grow a new idea in your business, you have to put down the roots first before you put anything up in public. So look at how it's pushing down, forming networks underneath, so it can pull up water, it can pull up nutrients before, and then here, finally, comes the leaves. And interesting, if you notice, what it actually is pushing up is the stem. It's protecting the leaves, because the leaves are the important bit. That's the bit the public are going to be seeing. So it pushes up, uses the bent stem to push through the hard soil, all the while putting out an even stronger root network. And then eventually, once it knows it's got a solid foundation to build on, up come the leaves. These bits are actually the seed, the rest of the seed, which will eventually fall off as the leaves open up. The leaves will then move around because they need to find the light. They need the chlorophyll so they can start to photosynthesize, which is how they make energy out of the light. And you'll see them moving around. They'll follow the light around. If you put your seedling somewhere where there's one direction of light, the plant will move towards it. It absolutely will. So that's what will happen when you start your seedling. And this is sort of what you'll see. I've got some of these with me, and I'm going to suggest take one of those and pass it around that side. So these I planted about 12 days ago, I think. The first thing you'll get is you'll get the taproot. You'll get a big, thick root out the bottom. And it starts to develop. So that will come through in about 5 days. You'll then start getting a proper root network within about 10 days, and then you'll get the growth. Once the growth starts above the surface, it will be very fast. So really what I'm suggesting is that you use your broad bean seed as a timer. So think about what your business growth idea is. What's the seed you want to sow to grow in your business? And as you'll see on the, we'll come to the questions. What's the seed of the idea you want to grow in your business? You've had lots of talk today, lots of time to think about what do you actually want to start growing. Think about the idea you want to grow. When you're going to sow the seed, are you ready to start growing now, or do you need to wait a while? Now, as I said, broad beans, you can sow that seed anytime between now and probably next April, even May, and it will grow, and it will eventually flower, produce beans, and you can harvest. So you don't have to be ready to sow it immediately. Maybe you've got a burning idea, and you're going to sow it tonight. You're ready to go. Because the next part of the challenge is, what roots are you going to put down in the first 5 to 7 days? By the time that rooting network appears at the bottom of the jiffy, you need to have put down the roots of your business idea. Because if you haven't put down those roots, you can't take up the water, you can't take up the nutrients. You cannot start to grow successfully. So what are you going to put down? And actually, I can illustrate that quite graphically. These were sown about 3 weeks ago, exactly the same day, treated exactly the same way. The only difference is, when I was potting them up, and I'll explain that in a moment, I broke the roots on this one. I was clumsy with it, broke the root, and boy, can you see the difference. If you have, and I swear I didn't do it on purpose to make the point, but I thought it illustrated it rather nicely. That's the difference. If you haven't got roots, if you haven't got that ability to put down that stabilizer, because that's what the roots are, they're stabilizers for your business idea, you're going to struggle. And that is one of the things you will need to do once your jiffy is full, once you can see lots of roots, is to posh it up into a little pot. Just some soil out the garden, even a yogurt pot with a hole in the bottom will be absolutely fine. A hole at the bottom just for drainage. You don't need to buy pots, compost, soil is absolutely fine. So, what are the roots you're going to put down? What will be the first thing to be seen in public from your idea? And you've got about 10 to 12 days before that plant starts to appear in public. So by the time that green shoot starts to appear, what is that going to be from your business idea? You see where this is going? It's a timer. When will it be potted up? You will need to pot it up. If you just leave it in that jiffy, it will eventually run out of feed and it will fail. So you do need to pot it up. So actually, how's your business idea need to be potted up? How is it going to be taken to the next level? Does it need to have more room to grow? Does it need more nutrients? What are you going to do to support it? How will you feed, water, nurture your idea? It's going to need watering. If you forget to water the plant, it will die. So what are you going to do? How are you going to nurture it and look after it? Will the idea ever mature? A plant will mature. This, planted now, will flower in about April, and you'll be able to harvest beans off it in probably late May, if you plant now. If you plant over the winter, it'll be a little bit later than that. But actually, you'd be surprised, they catch up quite quickly. They'll certainly be in fruit by June, July next year. But when's your idea going to mature? And when you're going to harvest? I'm going to talk more about the harvest in a moment. Because let's face it, that's the important bit. When are you going to harvest? And then once you have harvested, what are you going to save to reinvest? And let's investigate that a little bit more. So there we go. Broad beans, looking yummy in a bowl. That plant should produce about 36 beans. On average, they produce 6 pods of about 6 beans each. So you should get about 36 beans. If you save those and sow next year, sow 10 of them next year, the following year you'll have 360 beans. Following year, save 10 from each plant, so you've got 100 seeds, and you can eat the rest. You'll have 3,600 seeds. Do the same again after that. By year 3, you've got 36,000 broad beans. You're in the broad bean business. But what happens if that bean was £1? If you were able to take that pound and multiply it up, so by year 3 you've got £36,000. How could you do that? What conditions would you have to have in your business to grow that pound into £36,000 that quickly? So think about how you're going to harvest. Because you could just eat all your beans. You could take all the profit out of that business idea. And it then end of. You've got nothing to sow for next year. But actually, if you keep reinvesting into your business by saving your beans, they sound like magic beans, don't they? Actually, you're going to start building. And all of a sudden, you're going to have an awful lot of beans on your hands. But there are some things that could check the growth. There are going to be costs in your business. Now, if you're growing, they're going to be compost, pots, heat, time, all that sort of stuff. In your business, depending on what your business idea, it could be new staff, it could be new resources, it could be new machinery, it could be new technology, new software, all that sort of stuff. There will be costs associated with that growth. So you might have to reinvest more than you'd originally anticipated. You might have to save more beans. You might have crop failure. You might decide not to sow all the beans at once, because actually if the first lot you sow all get eaten by slugs, you've got no beans. So actually, how are you going to protect against that idea falling straight over because it hasn't been protected? You might find that somebody else starts sowing broad beans. And let's face it, we've all of a sudden got, what, about 40 broad bean sowers in this country, in this room. And all of a sudden you've got competition. Somebody else comes up with a similar idea. And that's going to check your growth. You're not going to get to that 36,000 beans quite so quickly. Because if you're suddenly competing, you've got problems. The market's going to be saturated. You might just get bored of beans. And let's face it, broad beans, you could get bored of them. They're not the most exciting of vegetables. But actually, if you get bored of your business idea, you might suddenly go, oh, actually, I'm not going to grow broad beans, I'm going to grow French beans. I'm no longer working on this software, I think that's going to be much more interesting and much more lucrative. So actually, again, that might check your growth. So that's part of your growth plan. And do you actually have the capacity to grow 1,000 broad bean plants? Probably not. Do you have the capacity in your business to grow at that pace? Do you have the capacity to actually produce the product, the service, whatever it is you want to grow? So you've got one little seed. It's one idea. That's my challenge to you. Give it the right conditions for growth, and you actually can't stop it. Once a seed has come into contact with water, it will start to sprout. In fact, it was mentioned from the stage upstairs earlier about sprouted seeds. Put them in water, they will sprout. It is absolutely what they do. It's very hard to stop it. So what about your business? What is it that's stopping your business growing? It's very easy to grow a garden, less easy to grow a business. But what is it that's stopping your business growing? Is it lack of feed? Are you putting the right resources in? Are you getting bored of what you're growing? What's checking the growth? Do you need to prune? All those sorts of things. Because your garden never stops growing. I'm sure you all recognise the rings in a tree. Even something that's huge as a tree will continue to grow. There will always be growth. You might not notice it year on year, and exactly the same is true of your business. There's always going to be an infinitesimal growth. It has to. Things have to move on, have to change. So if the garden never stops growing, nor should your business. If your business is stagnating, or dare I say it, shrinking, unless that's been your decision, there's a problem. You've got to be tracking growth. So actually, to track the growth of trees, you will sometimes see trees with bands, plastic bands put around them. And it's to check that they are growing. And it's one of the ways of checking for disease. And if the band snaps, you know that the tree has grown another little bit. So what's your band on your business to make sure that it's still growing? So you can keep an eye on that. It may well be financial results. The garden is already planning to grow for next year. I took these last night in my garden. Snowdrops, a very early snowdrop. That's a helenium at the top there. It's put out the growth. It's flowered for this year. Next year's growth has already come through. And the buds. That's on an amelanchier tree in my garden. The buds, as the leaves fall from this year, the buds are already forming for next year. So next year's growth is already underway. Is your business ready to grow? So that's my challenge to you. Grow your business like you grow your garden. If you do decide to take that challenge, I would love to see some pictures. So tweet me. I'm at Stephen Brighton. On Twitter is probably the easiest one, or I think that at Varda Media is on my card. Get in touch. If you've got any problems, got any questions, give me a shout. I'm always happy to help. I'm always happy to share garden knowledge. I'm always happy to talk about gardening, probably more so than business, quite frankly. But actually, that is my challenge. Grow the bean, use it as a timer to keep you on track with your business growth idea. Thank you very much for coming and listening. I hope you enjoy it.
I just listened to Steve. I found it very inspiring. Although I'm a keen gardener, that's not my business, but it was just fantastic to hear the insight.
For me, I thought it was great. I think it was a beautiful metaphor. Just caused me to reflect on what sort of business I had. And I think the thing that really stood out for me was the reinvesting, how much do you want to take out of it, and and also the idea of how long a new idea will take. So there's some really great stuff in there for me.
I have just seen Steve do his talk about gardening and using it as a beautiful metaphor for growth. I am a keen gardener, so the metaphor just locks in for me.
It wasn't just a metaphor that was just neat. He really explained and brought to life what the metaphor meant in business in a really enlivening and colourful way, and it really did hit home, so I really enjoyed that.